This is a special edition of the Arcfluence podcast, and it comes to you live, recorded live, from the AIA Ohio 2025 conference, where Arcfluence principals Paul Fatkins and Nick Karakaian presented integrated living, ADUs, as catalysts for community and sustainable growth, and accepted 2 People's Choice Awards for the Cliffs and BeAligned Health, the latter completed in collaboration with Ron Scott Design Build. Thank you to everyone who voted and supported these projects. Now, let's join the presentation.
I'm Paul. Nice to meet you guys. I guess I'll start from the beginning. I went to Kent State undergrad. So I was there where actually Nick and I met with a couple other buddies as well that we stayed in touch with, and ended up going to Cincinnati for my graduate work. Ended up in Chicago for about 10 years. We did a lot of high-rise residential. So residential is where I started off when I went into the world of the professionals out of school. And then relocated to Columbus a few years ago. I was working for a firm here in Columbus locally. We were doing more like retail stuff, focused, but still did some residential stuff on the side. So kind of always had my hand on residential stuff, or a pulse on it at least. Then a couple of years ago, Nick and I joined forces and decided to start Arcfluence. So
finally,
yeah. So it took a pretty traditional path, just out of school, joining a firm and, in the trenches, then jumped to another firm until eventually we founded our own firm. So a little bit about the background. And like I said, a lot of residential, definitely going back 17 years or so on my side of things.
my name is Nick Karakaian. I've been designing for 17 years, but I have not been at a firm since an internship my graduate year. I took a different path. I got into a firm in New York City that did commercial interiors. I sold furniture. So I did layouts for big companies, and I got an interesting start that was more sales focused than anything else. That ended up getting me a job at Google, which was tons of fun. I got to help design 1 million square foot, and I was more the liaison or project. I wouldn't even call me the project manager, just a project coordinator between the architecture firms and the leadership at Google. And then I helped open Chelsea office and YouTube studio and even the Cambridge office eventually a couple of years later. Corporate was just not for me. So I'm just like, okay, I need to go on my own. So I ended up getting my contractor's license, my realtor's license, and I just started taking on my fellow colleagues at Google as clients doing their kitchens and bathrooms. So I did luxury kitchens, bathrooms in New York City for years, and I loved it. I also started noticing that, hey, I'm adding a lot of value to these apartments, and I'm not charging enough money, or can I do this on my own? And I didn't know enough at the time to buy and sell real estate, but I slowly started getting into that universe and meeting the right people. After we bought our home in Queens, we got a great opportunity. We had a basement rental, which got me thinking about Airbnb 14 years ago. Me and my wife, we got a knock on the door. We sold property for more than I could ever possibly imagine. And I'm like, hey, let's buy an RV and travel around the world. And yeah, we ended up going all over the country and landed here in Columbus about 8 years ago. Wasn't expecting to come back to Ohio. I actually grew up in the Cleveland area. And the main reason is because we wanted to purchase real estate. And all the awesome places we went to, like Austin and Denver and Seattle and Portland, I found out that while we're getting more square footage, we were paying about the same as far as the cost of living as New York City was. So I'm like, wow, our dollar goes a lot further here, which is kind of ironic because 8 years later, it doesn't seem like it anymore. It's gotten expensive. I've been talking to Paul for years about starting our own firm. We've only been together a couple of years, but in the last 7, 8 years, we've done 700 plus homes and a handful of commercial properties as of late. And
You want to mention Coin too?
sure, for the last few years, I've run Coin, Central Ohio Investors Network, the largest free real estate meetup in New York. My mindset, even with our clients, is around value. Like, can we make this work? Is this going to be worth it to you to do rather than pie in the sky dreams?
Definitely a lot of residential stuff in our backgrounds. And obviously, Nick is still running Coin now. So again, it's an investor meetup, basically residential stuff like across the board. As far as Columbus, we'll get into a little more specifics. Like Nick said, over the last 8 years, it's changed dramatically in Columbus. We kind of have a good problem here to have. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest. Housing production has really not been keeping up with the population growth. So, as a result, like prices have been going up. There's, issues with like rentals being available and the rates here that people are paying for rents. So, I mean, overall, it's kind of gotten to the point where it's been building up over the last several years. And it's, it's to the point where Columbus has to start getting creative with some of their housing solutions. Obviously, an ADU is not like the solution to fix the, crisis that we have with the housing units, but it's definitely something that can help aid in a solution for the housing problem that is definitely the city is facing. So, I mean, the last year alone, we had around 30,000 new residents come into Columbus. The metro area is growing 38% higher than the national average for metro areas last year. The region growth has exceeded all of our Midwest, basically cities, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Cleveland. So again, it's just one of the fastest growth rates going back from like 2017 to now. Similar to like Raleigh, Jacksonville, Nashville, San Jose. Of the 6 of the top 10 fastest growing counties in Ohio, it's all within basically the Columbus region. So it's the whole metro region. You can see that the housing supply gap, we're talking thousands of, like 4,000 units deficit at least each year. Definitely a good problem to have, but it's a problem that the city has recognized, and we'll get into that in some of the later slides. And so, obviously ADUs can be part of that solution.
Okay, real quick on the definition of an ADU, accessory dwelling unit. This is a secondary independent living space on the same parcel of a single family home. It's known, it has a lot of other names. Carriage house is super common here, but it's also referred to as mother-in-law suite, in-law suite, guest house, carriage house, backyard cottage if you're from Canada, secondary suite or granny flat if you're from Australia or London. We do a lot of attic conversions, basement conversions. Obviously, if you're using old housing stock, they have their own issues that you have to deal with, and they're not adding as much value in terms of square footage. We're seeing a lot of attached ADUs, which is going to be where we're adding square footage as an addition, or detached, which is going to be your separate structure. Super common out west, and here they come in the form of carriage houses. Have you had the value add conversation with your clients? This is something that I do all the time. It actually helps us expand the scope of work or make the project possible if there's a financial strain on the project. But we have the conversation saying, hey, typically, and I always say, talk to your real estate agent. I'm not your real estate agent, but if we're doing an attic conversion, the square footage and value of the attic or basement is going to come in about half of what you're going to see on the first and second floor. So does it make sense to put the money here if we have the space to do an addition or a carriage house where you're going to have a much better return and have an easier time with some of the components of independent living, et cetera, its own entry, that's going to help maximize the property value. Who benefits from ADUs? The short answer is everybody. Right now, it's getting harder to afford housing for the young folks, young families, and first-time home buyers. A lot of times, they might need a rental unit just to purchase and get into the market in the first place. Sometimes they want to go to a more desirable neighborhood where schools are better so their kids can go to a better school. Having that additional rental income can offset the mortgage is going to help them do that and make it a reality. You also have young professionals working from home. I know a lot of us have gone back to the office since COVID, but there's still some of us that have stayed in the home office, and it gets a little gray area if you're working out of a bedroom or kitchen in your primary house. Having an ADU certainly gives you that flex space and added home value and future rental income potential. Empty nesters, if we're downsizing. So I live in the German Village area, and there's a lot of folks who are retired on fixed income, and they're like, taxes are going up, everything's going up, this is crazy, but I don't want to move and I don't want to leave this neighborhood because I've been here forever and I love it. Let's pull some equity out of the house, let's build you an ADU. You move into that smaller space that's probably going to be more suited for your needs with that isn't dated and difficult to navigate. And now you can rent out your house and stay in the neighborhood you want to stay at. Aging parents. So I love to travel. I lived in Italy for a year, in Germany. It's common everywhere I go except for the United States for generational living. We're starting to see a lot more of that. Having an additional unit on the property is going to give you some flexibility options where you can have mom and dad come and stay with you rather than put them in a home, or have your kids stay with you. This is a great way just to get into investing where you already have the parcel and you're simply developing what you have already. Great way to get into the market.
So obviously, with an ADU, it's just a single unit that's on the lot. It's not like you're necessarily building, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units. It's on multiple units. So there's certain benefits to it. So kind of like big picture, like Nick said, like there's certain preservation to the neighborhood. That's definitely a key component of an ADU. The front house or existing house that's on the parcel remains, whether you're doing an addition or something internal or detached. So the character of the neighborhood is preserved. It's not like you're making a dramatic impact in the neighborhood. So that aspect of it makes it very attractive. It's a smaller footprint, so it's less than a traditional single-family house. ADUs are really a great way to introduce some diversity into the communities. Again, like Nick mentioned, people on different life stages, different income levels. So there's definitely a wide range of people that an ADU could be appropriate for. And then just overall, what I like to think of, especially for ADUs, is this kind of gentle density idea. We have existing infrastructure in place for these communities and single-family homes. So to add an ADU on the site, tap into existing infrastructure that's already there is just, in my opinion, a win-win. We're not going out to the outskirts of the city, bulldozing farmland, building a development with a bunch of single-family homes. So, increasing the density and using the existing infrastructure is definitely a huge benefit to minimize the environmental impact. Around 2017 or so, they actually started to implement changes and reforms to make ADUs more attractive. Since 2017, they've had about 20,000 ADU permits applications. To the point now where about 22% of all new applications for single-family homes or these additional units are essentially ADU units. And again, it all points back to the policy reforms. It's streamlined permitting where they simplify the approval process. They even have pre-approved plans. The images you see here on the right of the screen actually come from the LA's city's website, where they have a list of ADUs where you can basically scroll through and then you talk to whoever about getting it done. And the city's already seen it, the city has already signed off on it, it's in their database, and it just streamlines the whole process to get approvals and cut through all the red tape. And then they even have financial incentives, grants that are available, low interest loans. They reduce fees for certain homeowners that qualify for these programs.
So essentially, they're doing a number of different things to experiment on and maximize density here. So one of them is triplex zoning. So every residential lot is now able to go to 3 units regardless of previous zoning. Parking reform, which is something super common in a lot of the cities that are making these reforms, just eliminating the minimum parking standards and requirements for new residential development. Relaxation, just a simplified process that will encourage people to do this and make it less of a barrier for permitting. And then transit-oriented development. And this is just giving allowances for those specific areas to promote increased density around those areas. So Minneapolis is leading the Midwest in housing production per capita. Over 50% of the new plexes wouldn't have been possible under the old zoning. This is creating a stabilized rent environment. Like here, we're spiking in a lot of places. We even see like stagnant times and dips. They have pretty much just the little engine that could, and they're just seeing a nice increase in rent, but not too much where people are getting priced out like in other cities. Sustained housing production despite a slower population growth. We're not building fast enough to match our population.
All right, and then our final example here that we'll kind of talk through before we circle back to Columbus, Portland. And the reason why we have Portland in here is because they've been one of the really, really early adopters of ADU-friendly policies. So it's been around since 2010. It's the same story basically anywhere where these reforms are put into place. A couple of years afterwards, again, the demand dramatically spiked. So just to the north of Seattle, I was able to find this chart. Again, it's always the case where there's definitely a demand for people to build these accessory dwelling units. Similar to some of the stuff in LA, they've waived development fees to encourage ADU construction. And there's definitely a strong engagement from our community in creating designs and having them built in the community out there. So the architectural community is very strong in representing these designs and working with the community.
How many of you own a rental property? Just curious. A couple of you. I think when we think of investing, we think of these large development projects, but there are a lot of people that may just have one rental property or just a couple that help have retirement and does a number of amazing things. If we want to get into it, let me know. But just an example, this is a great way for you to get started. You just have a very low barrier to entry because you already have the parcel and we're building a smaller footprint typically. Plus you can, as architects, we can have fun with this and like be a little bit more creative, right? So not only can you get your foot in the door with investment, but you can do something exciting that you're good at, and you can do it at a price that's reasonably affordable. I don't know if you shopped or you're from the Columbus area, like prices are going crazy right now for real estate. High return on investment, just because a new space is easily rented here, especially if there's different strategies for renting. If you want to do an STR, short-term rental, a mid-term rental, long-term rental, depending on how hands-on you want to be, but you can maximize income and get your return on investment faster. Diversity in the rental strategy, again, just going into the short-term, mid-term, and long-term tenants, depending on how much you want to do, how much you want to be involved in, but it will move the needle on your income for sure. There are some properties that we have where we're getting 3 times what the long-term tenant would necessarily pay. We have a team that manages it at this point, but I do remember cleaning toilets and answering phone calls at 2 a.m. in the morning years ago, which is not fun. If you are in a position to make this a realistic thing, short-term renting would be an option for you, right? If it's just out of reach with a standard rental, you can make it possible by putting in that extra effort. Although, to be fair, it is a full-time job and there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, I'll also add to that too. We just did a tour of the rental unit next to us, the One Peninsula, and I think they said 95% occupied basically in the rentals. So again, and they're building another building that's going to be rentals as well. So, the entire area here, if you have rental units available, it's definitely, if that's your goal is to rent it out, it's pretty easy to do once you have that unit available. Again, I touched on it a little bit before, just about reduced environmental impact. Definitely, it's a smaller, more compact space. So, you'll see a 40 to 60% reduction in cost just in heating and cooling because, again, it's a more compact space. So, you can have a more efficient use of energy. I already mentioned tapping into the existing infrastructure. As far as transportation, I know Nick mentioned the transit-oriented development. Obviously, if you're in the community that you want to be in, and that's where you're working and living, instead of topping in your car from out in, wherever in Delaware County, up near somewhere, you can basically walk to your job or, walk to the local bar or local shop. You don't have to hop in your car to necessarily go everywhere. So that's definitely a reduction on transportation if you have a unit that's available in these communities that are desirable where people want to live and work. Just final thing, it's a smaller scale. So again, definitely reduction in costs. So implementing some of, green building strategies like solar panels could be more attractive because it's not a full-size single-family house. We're going to touch on the zoned-in stuff now. So this is definitely very Columbus specific. And it's kind of crazy to think about this when you really think about it, because before they started this initiative, it was 70 years before they actually got into this. I mean, think about it. What kind of cars were we driving 70 years ago? What kind of phones were we using 70 years ago? I mean, it's just okay, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But obviously it was broke because they were getting thousands of variance applications every single year. So the city finally kind of woke up, especially with recent growth and seeing housing deficit within Columbus. And they realized maybe we should dust off the zoning code and rethink some of our strategy.
It's frustrating when you have to get 4 variances for a duplex. Why do we need to go through a 4 or 5 month process? And there's not even a commission. If there's a commission, it might be a 6 month process.
Yeah, and then the commissions are another part of it that can add to the complexity. So right now, I think, they've started to work on some. They passed phase 1. We'll get into the timeline here in the next slide. Phase 1 is already in place along all corridors within Columbus. It's still fairly early on to where some of the commissions, like Victorian Village Historic Commission, if you're doing a carriage house there, you're still going to struggle to get things through the commission, because even though maybe you are in one of the new zoning areas, but if you're in areas controlled by the commission, there's still some areas that need to align better. So, I mean, there's still a little bit of challenges to get things through if you're dealing with the commission. On the zoning side, if you don't have any commissions to do with, maybe you're in one of the new areas, great. You're off to the races. And regulations have definitely been reduced and are a lot more friendly for stuff. As far as the upcoming stuff, I think it's 40%?
For phase 2.
For phase 2, yeah. There's 40%. That's so it's still in process at the city level. You can see it goes out to 2027 right now. But yeah, the next round for phase 2, they're going to have a lot wider swatch of areas. It'll include not just the corridors, but some areas in between corridors. And it's about 40% of the city is going to be impacted. Even after 2027, there'll still be places that have the 70-year-old zoning code in place, unfortunately. But they are taking steps to address some of this stuff. So it's definitely good to see that they're finally making progress on it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these reforms are taken from case studies in other cities that Columbus has studied. The original first phase, though, that had the about 5% impact of the city, like we're seeing corridor buildings that are reaching out to the edges of the city where you could only go up 3 stories in the past. And now, as of last year, we go up 12 stories if we add the affordable housing components, which is changing the entire game. It's also, even if you have a property, just the property goes up overnight on that. So it's a great opportunity. And just to see what happens in the next 10 to 15 years is going to be dramatic. Some of the ADU specific reforms that are going to be, they're actually talking about it right, and will be in October, and then it'll be going into effect early next year. It's just going to be some of the same things we saw in the other cities where we have this relaxed parking requirements. We allow both attached and detached ADUs. There are a lot of residential lots right now where it's like an R2 where you could do an attached ADU, but you have to go through this entire process if you want to build an apartment above the garage. And then just a simplified permitting process where I think they're going to start with a dedicated team. If you're doing this specific project, it's going to go in this line, and they're used to dealing with these specific things so that they can handle it and fast track it rather than a lot of this back and forth. Oh, great. These are fun slides. Maximizing value and functionality. So I love space planning on these things. Like I said, I got my start in small apartments in New York City. So these are fundamentals that are probably pretty well known and common sense, but we want to make these smaller footprints feel larger, right? And comfortable. So we're going to combine these rooms and spaces and functionality. So kitchen and living are going to be combined. We're going to minimize hallways. We don't want to waste that space. And quite frankly, if we're designing a place that's going to lean towards accessibility, we want large, wide, big hallways. So we can be thoughtful about our design to eliminate them at all costs, unless there's going to be function like laundry and a half bath or something inside of those corridors. Tall ceilings, bigger windows, more natural light, all the things. And also, depending on your strategy, you may be building this for your home office or parents, but maybe one day you want to rent it out. Make sure your bedroom is a decent size. I much rather, assuming we're in an A-class neighborhood, not if we're in a C-class neighborhood, so there's a different conversation. But if we're in a B to an A-class neighborhood, we're doing one big building, one big bedroom over 2 smaller bedrooms all day long. We want a king-size bed in there for future guests if we're renting out this property. And you can have that conversation with your clients and just go through those motions. They're a real estate agent. I mean, the more you can help facilitate a team to give more definitive design answers to your clients or more options for them to think about will help potentially increase the scope of work I have found. And it really just helps them in the long run and makes a more exciting project for you. Thank you. Shared outdoor space for entertaining. Again, versus private outdoor space, I think we should have both. If you're going to do a 2-resident situation on one parcel, you probably want to have a space that we share for flexibility. At the same time, I may be renting out that space, or I may not want to see my family. I may want to step out on the balcony or a private patio and just sit with my dog and have a beer. So I think trying to work in and have the conversation with your clients of having both of those is really going to help the upside of whatever you decide to do with that property, especially if it's a rental. Universal design, this is super fun and a really deep conversation that we don't have time to dive into, but I just did one of our rentals at all universal design. The only drawback, I would say most of the things that you do in terms of bigger doors, low thresholds, outlet placement, countertops a little bit smaller, and the appliances are probably the only thing that really comes at a cost. Everything else is literally the same. It's just being thoughtful about how you design the process. Even the paint colors you use, there's a psychology for paint. So when you're thinking about what we're going to do with the space, it might not impact all of your clients or all the occupants that are going to be in the space, but you can now market this and literally increase your rent just for these simple, slight changes. And you can bring that value to your clients and let them know, hey, if you ever change your mind on what the strategy is here, you can do this now, just make these simple changes. That really won't cost that much. Although the oven that opens sideways, that's super expensive. Other than that though, it's pretty similar. Pet-friendly considerations. Everybody has pets now. Literally, everybody has pets now since COVID. So I love my 2 dogs, and you actually can charge for pets if you have a rental, and people want to take their pets when they travel now. So there are simple things you can do, just like surface material selections, a fenced backyard, private area, really simple things that don't really cost a lot of money that will be like, oh, you're being thoughtful about this. This is great. So on the client side, and then when you're renting it side, marketing. You could charge more for a simple fence. You can charge more money for a rental. Storage considerations, depending on the strategy. We're not going to do super big closets where space is at a premium, but we do want to have a housekeeping closet for supplies for a rental. We want to kind of talk about the strategy there. So rather than one large space, we look at doing multiple smaller storage spaces for flexibility.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. It's like, this is kind of like universal in terms of like residential design. Like even the tour we were just on, the building across the street here, they were talking about the dog area to walk the dog, and they have like a dog wash station even like in the building. So again, obviously on a different scale, a lot more units in that building, but still they still have these amenities for pets, for example. So there's a lot of overlap. Again, it's another residential.
How many people have a pet in this room?
Yeah,
there's like 3 people that didn't put their hands up. That's it.
So anyway, to kind of wrap up, we have some key takeaways. Obviously, we've talked about quite a bit of things, thrown out some examples, thrown in some Columbus-specific stuff. In my opinion, everybody should be passionate about ADUs. Again, like I really like the gentle density idea, kind of maintaining the character of the neighborhood, but still being able to add a little bit more to the neighborhood and tap into the existing infrastructure that's there. So, I mean, there's just economic, social, environmentally friendly housing options. That's essentially what the ADU is. So I think everybody as an architect in our community really should, it's not like you need to be the champion of it, but definitely you should have some passion towards it. They're not necessarily super cheap, definitely a lot more affordable than a single family house. The range can be anywhere from 100,000 to like up to 350,000 to get some of these built. I mean, obviously it depends on a lot, exactly what the size is, the complexity, quality of finishes. There's a ton that can go into where you fall in that price range.
We did just design a 3-story carriage house that, I don't know, can you go back a couple slides to show that? This one it's going to be awesome, but it's also going to be.
It's the backside.
Go keep going a little bit more. Get a second. Right there. So, I mean, this is going to be probably like $750,000, $800,000 bill, but you're also getting luxury living.
Outside of the range, but again, the range is definitely more typical. We did another one in Victorian Village that I think came in around the 250, 200 range, something like that. Definitely on the smaller side. So again, it can vary. There's a lot that goes into that, obviously. But as far as like new versus existing, if you're trying to renovate a garage or you're trying to work within like an attic space or a basement, some of the existing stuff can be a little more complex to work around. So, in general, we feel usually the best approach is to have a new detached ADU as far as like simplest, most cost-effective way to build out. It's just, again, it's a little more simple.
So again, rental income generation, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. Happy to chat more about it. But again, just so many people who are like, I'm going to rent. I lived in New York City and I rented for a few years and I'm just like, no, we need to buy a house. And we did it knowing that we're going to have a rental income in lower unit. And it just, ever since then, it's so good. Increased property value, multi-generational living, flexible use space, design opportunities. And again, you can have fun with these small builds and do what we are good at. And because sometimes we just held hostage to what our clients want. This is an opportunity to really kind of have fun and not kill the budget too. So you can do some of these really fun builds at a decent price.
Yeah. Actually on the screen is the Victorian Village on the backside of it. So again, you can see definitely a different scale.
And this was a really small and simple design, and it turned out great.
And then just to wrap up, we actually have a podcast. So if you guys, actually we did about a year ago, I think, not quite, but roughly about a year ago. If you grab the QR code, that'll take you to the podcast where we actually did a talk back then on ADUs as well. So obviously the little things have changed since then. Slightly different conversation today versus that conversation back then. But if you're interested in ADUs in general, definitely hop on the podcast, have a listen. Because like I said, it's pretty much the same topic we talked about a year ago.
Our podcast is much more exciting than what you just experienced. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
This has been the Arcfluence podcast. As always, you can get more information and additional content on arcfluence.com. Please subscribe on the platform of your choice and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.